I watched my grandfather's hand tremble as he signed the check for $18,000, and every instinct in my body screamed that something was wrong with these people standing in his living room, wearing matching polo shirts with the Pine Valley HOA logo embroidered on the chest. My name is Zachary Yates, and I had driven down to Pensacola, Florida from Birmingham to spend the weekend with Grandpa Frank after Hurricane Melissa tore through the Panhandle 2 weeks earlier. The storm had been a Category 3 when it made landfall, ripping shingles off roofs and knocking down trees across the entire neighborhood. Grandpa's house took some damage, nothing catastrophic, but enough that repairs were needed. He lived in Pine Valley Estates, one of those planned communities that popped up in the early 2000s, with strict HOA rules about everything from mailbox colors to lawn height. The woman doing most of the talking was named Patricia Hendricks, and she had that particular haircut that screamed entitlement, the one where the back is short and the front swoops down at aggressive angles. She wore too much makeup for a Saturday morning, and spoke in that condescending tone people use when they think they are smarter than everyone else in the room. "Mr. Yates, we really need this payment today so we can begin work on Monday morning," Patricia said, tapping her perfectly manicured nail on the invoice she had placed on his coffee table. "The contractor we have lined up is in high demand after the storm, and if we do not secure your spot now, it could be months before anyone can get to your repairs." Standing behind her was a younger guy, maybe 30, with slicked back hair and a cheap suit that did not match the casual polo Patricia wore. He introduced himself as Derek something, the HOA treasurer, and he had barely said 10 words since they arrived. He just stood there holding a leather portfolio and nodding at everything Patricia said. "I do not understand why I cannot just hire my own contractor," Grandpa Frank said. He was 82 years old but sharp as ever, retired from the Air Force after 30 years of service. "I have insurance, and they gave me an estimate of $9,000 for the repairs." Patricia's smile tightened. According to the Pine Valley Covenants, Section 12, Subsection 4, all exterior repairs must be approved by the HOA board and completed by board-approved contractors. This ensures consistency in quality and appearance throughout the community. Your insurance will reimburse you, of course, but we need to use our contractor to maintain neighborhood standards. I had been sitting quietly in the corner, but I could not keep my mouth shut any longer. "Can we see a copy of that section? And why is your contractor charging double what his insurance estimated?" Patricia turned to me with a look that could freeze water. "And you are his grandson, Zachary." "Well, Zachary, this is homeowner business. Your grandfather signed the covenants when he purchased his home in 2003. If he has questions, he can review his copy." She turned back to Grandpa Frank. "The higher cost reflects the current market conditions after the storm. Materials are scarce, labor is expensive, and our contractor provides premium service." Derek finally spoke up, his voice nasal and irritating. "We also handle all the insurance paperwork for you, Mr. Yates. Takes the burden off your shoulders. We deal with the adjusters, we manage the project. You just sit back and let us handle everything." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I pulled out my phone and started searching for Pine Valley HOA information while they continued their pitch. Grandpa Frank looked tired, and I could see he just wanted them out of his house. The storm had stressed him out, and these vultures were taking advantage of that. "If I pay you today, when does the work start?" Grandpa asked. "Monday morning, bright and early," Patricia said. "We will have a crew here by 8 a.m. The work should take about a week, maybe 10 days depending on weather." I found the Pine Valley HOA website, but it was bare bones, Just a contact form and a generic welcome message. No documents, no covenant information, nothing useful. Red flag number 1. I need to think about it, Grandpa Frank said, setting down the pen. Patricia's expression shifted from fake friendly to cold in a heartbeat. Mr. Yates, I must remind you that Section 18 of the covenants requires storm damage to be repaired within 30 days of the event. We are already 2 weeks in. If you delay and miss the deadline, the HOA can place a lien on your property and fine you $500 per week until repairs are completed. I am trying to help you avoid that situation. That sounds like extortion, I said, standing up. That sounds like someone who did not read the rules before buying property in a deed-restricted community. Patricia shot back. These covenants exist to protect property values for all residents. Your grandfather understood that when he moved here. Grandpa Frank looked at me, then at Patricia, then down at the check he had started to write. I could see the weight of the decision pressing on him. He was from a generation that respected authority and followed rules, even when those rules were being weaponized against him. Let me talk to my grandson for a minute, he said quietly. Patricia's jaw clenched, but she plastered that fake smile back on. Of course. We will wait outside, but Mr. Yates, we really do need an answer today. They walked out to the front porch, and I immediately sat down next to Grandpa Frank. Something is not right about this, I told him. Let me make some calls. I have a buddy from college who is a real estate attorney in Mobile. Let me run this by him before you sign anything. Zach, I am so tired, Grandpa admitted. The storm was scary. Part of my roof peeled back during the worst of it, and I was sitting in my hallway at 3 in the morning listening to my house get torn apart. I just want it fixed. I know, Grandpa, and we will get it fixed. But not by these people. Give me until Monday. If my buddy says this is legitimate, you can sign then. What difference does 2 days make? He nodded slowly. Okay, but if they fine me, they will not. And if they try, we will fight it. I walked out to the porch where Patricia and Derek were waiting. Patricia was on her phone and she put it away when she saw me. My grandfather needs until Monday to make his decision, I said. Patricia's nostrils flared. That is unacceptable. The contractor will still be available on Monday, and if he is not, then we will find someone else. Have a good weekend. Derek stepped forward like he was going to say something threatening, but Patricia put her hand on his arm. Fine. Monday. But if your grandfather misses this opportunity, the HOA will have no choice but to enforce the covenant requirements. She pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it to me. My cell number is on there. Call me by Monday at 5 p.m. with his decision. They walked to a black Lexus SUV parked in the driveway and drove off. I watched them go, memorizing the license plate out of habit more than anything else. Back inside, Grandpa Frank was reading through a thick stack of papers, the covenant documents he had signed 23 years ago when he bought the house. I found it, he said, pointing to a highlighted section. They are right. It does say repairs have to be approved by the HOA and done by approved contractors. What does it say about the fine? He flipped more pages. Here, $500 per week for non-compliance after 30 days. He looked up at me. Zach, maybe I should just pay them. Not yet. Let me do some digging first. I spent the rest of Saturday afternoon and evening researching. I called my buddy Marcus Chen, who practiced real estate law in Mobile. He was not in the office, but I left him a detailed voicemail asking him to call me back as soon as possible. Then I started searching online for complaints about Pine Valley HOA. What I found made my blood boil. There were dozens of posts on local Facebook groups and neighborhood forums from Pine Valley residents complaining about the HOA. Several people reported the exact same scenario. Patricia Hendricks showing up after the hurricane with inflated repair estimates and threats about fines and liens. One resident claimed they paid the HOA $22,000 for roof repairs that an independent inspector later valued at $8,000. Another said the approved contractor did such shoddy work that they had to pay someone else to fix it properly. And when they complained to the HOA, Patricia threatened them with more fines for unauthorized work. I took screenshots of everything and compiled them into a folder. Then I found the contact information for several of the people who had posted complaints. I reached out to 3 of them through Facebook Messenger, explaining my grandfather's situation and asking if they would be willing to talk to me. By Sunday morning, I had responses from 2 of them. A guy named Robert Torres called me at 8 a.m. "Your grandfather needs to run away from Patricia Hendricks as fast as he can," Robert said. "She is running a scam, man. I paid her $22,000 for roof work last year after Hurricane Ivan damaged my shingles. The crew that showed up did the work in 2 days, just slapped some tar paper and cheap shingles up there. 6 months later, I had leaks everywhere. I called Patricia, and she said my warranty did not cover water damage, only the installation. I had to pay another contractor $12,000 to rip it all off and do it right. Did you report her to anyone?" I tried. I filed a complaint with the county, but the HOA is a private organization, and apparently, as long as they are not breaking any specific laws, there is not much anyone can do. I talked to a lawyer, and he said I could sue, but it would cost more than I would get back. Patricia knows exactly how to work the system. What about the other board members? Is there not anyone else on the HOA board who can overrule her? Robert laughed bitterly. There are supposed to be 5 board members, but good luck finding out who they are. Patricia runs everything. I think Derek, the treasurer guy, is her nephew or something. The whole thing is corrupt, but most people just pay up because fighting it is too expensive and too exhausting. After I hung up with Robert, I got a similar call from a woman named Susan Pack. Her story was almost identical, except she had paid $19,000 for fence repairs that should have cost maybe $6,000. The contractor used substandard materials, and the fence started falling apart after a few months. "The worst part is the intimidation," Susan told me. After I started asking questions, Patricia sent me a violation notice for having my trash cans visible from the street, then another one for a weed in my flower bed, then another one for parking my car on the street overnight. She was clearly retaliating, hitting me with every petty violation she could find. Each one came with a $50 fine. I ended up just paying the original bill and keeping my head down because I could not afford to keep fighting. When Marcus called me back Sunday afternoon, I filled him in on everything I had learned. "This is textbook HOA abuse," Marcus said. "Unfortunately, it is also really common, especially after natural disasters. Here is the thing. The covenants are legally binding, so technically the HOA does have the authority to require approved contractors and impose fines. But there are a few angles we can work. First, the fees they are charging are probably unreasonable, and you could argue that in court. Second, if you can prove the contractor is doing substandard work or overcharging significantly, you might be able to challenge the approval. Third, there might be conflict of interest issues if Patricia or anyone on the board is getting kickbacks from the contractor. So what should my grandfather do? Do not pay them. Document everything. Get independent estimates from licensed contractors. If they try to fine him or put a lien on the property, we can fight it. I will represent your grandfather pro bono if it comes to that. Family discount since you are my boy. But Zach, be prepared for this to get ugly. People like Patricia Hendricks do not back down easily. Sunday night, I sat down with Grandpa Frank and showed him everything I had found. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the screenshots and notes I had printed out. "I should have known," he finally said. "When something seems too pushy, it usually is. Your grandmother would have seen right through this." Grandma Helen had passed away 3 years earlier, and I knew Grandpa still struggled with making big decisions without her. She had always been the sharp one, the one who questioned everything. "We are going to fix this," I told him. "First thing Monday morning, I am calling some contractors to get legitimate estimates. Then I am going to call Patricia and tell her we are declining the HOA's offer. She is going to come after me with those fines. Let her try. Marcus will help us fight it. And Grandpa, I think there is more going on here. I think Patricia might be getting money from this contractor under the table. If we can prove that, this whole thing falls apart." Monday morning, I called 3 roofing contractors in the Pensacola area. The first one could not come out until the following week. The second one was booked solid for 2 months. The third one, a company called Gulf Coast Roofing, said they could send someone out that afternoon for a free estimate. The estimator who showed up was a weathered guy in his 50s named Carl. He spent 30 minutes on the roof with a ladder and a camera, taking pictures and measurements. When he came down, he walked me through exactly what needed to be repaired. "You have got about 15 squares of shingles that need replacing on the south face and some flashing around the chimney that got bent up. The decking underneath looks solid, no structural damage. This is a pretty straightforward repair job." He pulled out his tablet and punched in some numbers. "I can have a crew out here next Monday and have this done in 2 days. Total cost would be $8,700, materials and labor." "The HOA is telling us it will cost $18,000, I said. Carl's eyebrows shot up. "For this? No way. Unless they are replacing the entire roof with premium architectural shingles and all new decking, there is no way this job costs 18 grand. Even with post-storm pricing, that is robbery." "Can you put that in writing?" "Sure thing." He emailed me the estimate right there from his tablet. "If you want us to do the work, just give me a call. I know you folks in Pine Valley have HOA rules, but we are licensed and insured and we do quality work. I have been in business here for 23 years. After Carl left, I called Patricia's cell phone. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Yates, I hope you are calling with good news. This is his grandson, Zachary. We are declining your offer. My grandfather is going to hire his own contractor." There was a long pause. "That is not how this works. I explained the covenant requirements. We are aware of the covenants. My grandfather will submit the proper paperwork for approval of his chosen contractor, as required. But he is not paying $18,000 for $8,000 worth of work." Patricia's voice turned icy. "The board will not approve an outside contractor. And since your grandfather has now officially declined our assistance, the 30-day clock is ticking. You have 12 days left before the fines start. We will see about that. Have a good day, Patricia." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking with anger, but I also felt energized. This woman was a bully, and bullies back down when you stood up to them, or at least that is what I thought. Tuesday morning, Grandpa Frank found a notice taped to his front door. It was a formal HOA violation letter stating that his damaged roof was creating an unsightly appearance that negatively impacts community property values, and that he was being fined $100 per day until repairs were completed, citing an emergency provision in the covenants that allowed accelerated fines for hazardous or unsightly conditions. "Can she do this?" Grandpa asked, holding the letter with a shaking hand. I called Marcus immediately. He asked me to send him a photo of the letter and a copy of the covenant documents. "Give me a few hours," Marcus said. "I need to read through these covenants carefully." But off the top of my head, that emergency provision is probably meant for things like structural hazards or code violations, not cosmetic issues. A roof with some missing shingles is not a community emergency. By Tuesday afternoon, Marcus called back. "Okay, I have read through everything. Here is the deal. The 30-day repair requirement is legitimate. The $500 weekly fine for non-compliance after 30 days is legitimate. But this $100 per day emergency fine is a stretch. The emergency provision clearly defines what qualifies as an emergency situation: structural collapse, fire hazard, health hazard, or code violations. Missing shingles do not meet that threshold unless the damage is so severe that it is causing immediate harm. I am guessing your grandfather's roof is not that bad. No, it is just cosmetic damage on one side. No leaks, no structural issues. Then Patricia is overreaching. I am going to draft a letter challenging the emergency fine and asserting your grandfather's right to choose his own contractor, subject to proper approval. We will send it certified mail so we have proof of delivery. In the meantime, go ahead and submit the approval paperwork for Gulf Coast Roofing. What if the board rejects it? Then we have grounds to argue they are acting in bad faith. Keep documenting everything, every conversation, every letter, every interaction. If this goes to court, we need a paper trail. I spent Tuesday evening filling out the contractor approval form from the HOA website. It required basic information about the contractor, proof of insurance and licensing, a detailed scope of work, and a timeline. I attached Carl's estimate and all the relevant documents and emailed it to the HOA board email address listed on the website. Wednesday morning, I got a one-sentence response from Patricia. "Your contractor submission has been reviewed and denied. The board has determined that Gulf Coast Roofing does not meet our quality standards." No explanation, no details, just a flat rejection. Marcus told me this was exactly what he expected. She is not even trying to hide the fact that she is blocking you. That actually works in our favor. Send another contractor submission. Let's see if she rejects that one too. I called another roofing company, Emerald Coast Construction. They came out Wednesday afternoon, gave an estimate of $9,200, and I submitted their approval paperwork that evening. Thursday morning, another one-sentence denial from Patricia. Marcus drafted a formal demand letter and sent it certified mail to Patricia, Derek, and the Pine Valley HOA board. The letter laid out our position. The emergency fines were improper. The contractor rejections were arbitrary and made in bad faith, and the HOA was violating its fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of the community. Marcus demanded that the fines be waived, that Gulf Coast Roofing be approved immediately, and that the HOA provide written documentation of the specific deficiencies that led to the contractor rejections. Friday afternoon, instead of a response from Patricia, two guys in a white pickup truck showed up at Grandpa Frank's house. They had a ladder and some equipment, and they started setting up in the driveway without knocking on the door. I went outside. "Can I help you?" The older of the two guys, a heavyset man with a sun-damaged face, said, "We are here to do the roof repair for the HOA. Nobody authorized you to be here. Lady named Patricia hired us." Said the homeowner refused to cooperate, so the HOA is exercising their right to make emergency repairs and bill the homeowner. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "This is private property. You do not have permission to be here. If you do not leave right now, I am calling the police." The guy shrugged. "Hey man, we are just trying to do our job. Patricia said she had authorization. She does not leave. Now." They packed up their stuff and drove off, but not before the older guy said, "You are making a mistake, buddy. That lady does not like being told no." I immediately called Marcus and told him what happened. He was furious. That is trespassing and potentially criminal. If they had actually started work without permission, that would be vandalism and destruction of property. We need to escalate this. I am going to contact the state attorney's office and file a complaint. This has gone way beyond an HOA dispute. That evening, Grandpa Frank got a new letter from the HOA. This one informed him that his total fines now amounted to $600 for the emergency violation, and that if the fines were not paid within 10 days, the HOA would file a lien against his property. The letter also stated that the HOA had arranged for emergency repairs to be completed the following Monday, and that the cost of those repairs, estimated at $24,000, would be added to his HOA account and subject to the same lien if not paid. Grandpa Frank sat at his kitchen table and put his head in his hands. "Zach, this is too much. Maybe I should just pay them and be done with it." "No." I sat down across from him. "Grandpa, they are counting on you giving up. That is how scams work. They pile on the pressure until you break." "But we are not going to break. Marcus is already filing complaints with the state. We have documentation of everything. They are not going to get away with this." "But what if they put a lien on my house? I cannot afford to lose my home." "You are not going to lose your home." A lien does not mean foreclosure. It just means they are claiming you owe them money. We will fight the lien in court and we will win. I promise you, Grandpa, we are going to beat these people. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of what we were up against. Patricia had all the power, all the leverage, and she clearly had no problem using it to crush anyone who stood in her way. That weekend, I did something I probably should not have done, but I was desperate and angry. I drove to the address listed on Patricia's business card. It was a large house in a newer development outside Pensacola, one of those McMansions with fake columns and a 3-car garage. There was a white pickup truck in the driveway, the same one the contractors had been driving when they showed up at Grandpa's house. I parked across the street and watched. About an hour later, Patricia came out of the house with the heavyset contractor guy. They stood in the driveway talking, and I took pictures with my phone. I could not hear what they were saying, but their body language was familiar, comfortable. This was not a business relationship. This was personal. After the contractor left, I sat there thinking about my next move. I could confront Patricia directly, but that would probably just make things worse. I could show Marcus the photos, but they did not really prove anything illegal, just suspicious. Then I had a better idea. I drove to the county clerk's office first thing Monday morning. Public records are public for a reason, and I wanted to see what I could find out about Patricia Hendricks and her relationship with the HOA. The clerk was a friendly, older woman who helped me navigate the computer system. I searched for property records, business filings, and any documents related to Pine Valley HOA. What I found was interesting. The contractor company, Fast Fix Construction, was registered to an owner named Gerald Hendricks, Patricia's husband. Or ex-husband. I could not tell from the records, but the last name was too much of a coincidence. I dug deeper. Gerald Hendricks also owned 2 other businesses, Hendricks Property Management and Coastal Home Services. A quick search showed that Coastal Home Services was listed as the management company for Pine Valley HOA. So Patricia was on the HOA board. Her husband owned the management company that ran the HOA, and he also owned the approved contractor that the HOA required everyone to use. It was a closed loop designed to funnel money from homeowners into their pockets. I took copies of everything and called Marcus immediately. "This is conflict of interest and possibly fraud," Marcus said after I explained what I found. "If Patricia is steering HOA business to her husband's company without disclosure, that is a breach of fiduciary duty at minimum. Depending on how the money flows, it could be embezzlement or wire fraud. We need to report this to the state attorney and probably the FBI. The FBI. If they are using mail or electronic communication to defraud homeowners, that is wire fraud, and that is federal. Let me make some calls." While Marcus worked his legal channels, I decided to take a different approach. I reached out to the local news station in Pensacola. Consumer protection stories were always popular, and this had all the elements: a corrupt HOA, elderly victims, a natural disaster, and a family running a scam operation. A reporter named Jennifer Carmichael called me back within an hour. "I am very interested in this story. We have been getting complaints about HOA abuse after Hurricane Melissa. Can you send me everything you have?" I sent her all my documentation, the screenshots of complaints from other residents, the contractor estimates, the letters from Patricia, the property records showing the Hendricks connection, everything. "This is really good stuff," Jennifer said. "I want to interview your grandfather, and I want to doorstep Patricia Hendricks with this information. Are you comfortable with that?" "Absolutely." Jennifer and a camera crew came to Grandpa Frank's house on Tuesday. He was nervous about being on camera, but once Jennifer started asking questions, he relaxed and told his story clearly and powerfully. He talked about his Air Force service, about losing his wife, about the fear he felt during the hurricane, and about how Patricia had taken advantage of him in his vulnerable moment. "I trusted them," Grandpa said, his voice cracking slightly. "I thought the HOA was there to help the community. I did not realize it was just a way for them to steal from us." Jennifer also interviewed Robert Torres and Susan Pack, getting their stories on camera. Then she did exactly what she promised. She showed up at Patricia's house with a camera crew and knocked on the door. I watched the footage later that evening when it aired on the 6 o'clock news. Patricia opened the door, saw the camera, and immediately tried to close it. But Jennifer was a pro. Patricia Hendricks, Jennifer Carmichael with Channel 7 News. "Can you comment on allegations that you are running a scam operation through Pine Valley HOA, steering business to your husband's construction company and overcharging residents for repairs?" "I have no comment. This is private property. You need to leave." Patricia's face was red, her composure completely gone. "Are you aware that your husband owns Fast Fix Construction, the only approved contractor for HOA repairs? Is that not a conflict of interest? Get off my property." Patricia slammed the door. The news story aired that night, and it was devastating. Jennifer laid out the whole scheme, showed the documents proving the Hendricks connection, interviewed the victims, and displayed the wildly inflated repair estimates. The story ended with a promise to follow up with local and state authorities about potential criminal charges. By Wednesday morning, the story had gone viral on local social media. The Pine Valley Facebook group exploded with residents sharing their own stories of HOA abuse. Several people announced they were filing formal complaints with the county. Someone started a Change.org petition to remove Patricia from the HOA board, and then things got really interesting. Thursday morning, Grandpa Frank received a letter from a law firm representing the Pine Valley HOA board. The letter stated that Patricia Hendricks had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into allegations of misconduct, and that all fines and liens against his property were being suspended until the investigation was complete. That same day, Marcus called with an update. The state attorney's office is opening an investigation. They are looking at wire fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering charges. The FBI field office in Pensacola is also interested because this might be part of a larger pattern. Apparently, the Hendricks have been running similar operations through multiple HOAs in the region. So we won. You are winning. But Zach, here is the thing. Even with criminal charges, your grandfather still needs his roof fixed, and he is still stuck in an HOA with broken leadership and corrupt covenants. The legal process is going to take months, maybe years. In the meantime, what is he supposed to do? That was a good question, and I did not have a good answer. Friday afternoon, I was sitting on Grandpa Frank's porch when a black BMW pulled into the driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out, someone I had never seen before. He was maybe 60, gray hair, polished shoes, the kind of guy who screamed lawyer or businessman. "Zachary Yates," he asked. "That is me. My name is Walter Simmons. I am an attorney representing several residents of Pine Valley who have been affected by the Hendricks situation." I saw the news coverage. Impressive work digging up all that information. "Have you got a few minutes to talk?" I invited him inside and introduced him to Grandpa Frank. Walter sat down and pulled out a folder full of documents. "I represent 23 Pine Valley residents who have paid inflated fees to the HOA over the past 3 years. Combined, we are talking about somewhere north of $400,000 in excess charges. I am putting together a class action lawsuit against Patricia Hendricks, Gerald Hendricks, Fast Fix Construction, Coastal Home Services, and the Pine Valley HOA Board. I would like your grandfather to join as a named plaintiff." "What would that mean for him?" I asked. "It means we fight this together. We go after them for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, and civil RICO violations. If we win, and I think we will, your grandfather and the other plaintiffs will get compensated for the money they lost, plus punitive damages. It also means we can force a complete overhaul of the HOA governance structure." Grandpa Frank looked at me. "What do you think, Zach?" "I think we do it. But first, we need to get your roof fixed." "How long is this lawsuit going to take?" Walter grimaced. "Realistically, 2 to 3 years. Discovery, depositions, motions, maybe a trial. These things move slowly. Grandpa does not have 2 to 3 years. He needs his roof fixed now, and he needs the HOA to stop harassing him." "I understand. Let me see what I can do." Walter made some calls, and by Monday of the following week, he had worked out a temporary agreement. The HOA board, now operating without Patricia, agreed to suspend all fines and liens against Grandpa Frank and to approve Gulf Coast Roofing for the repair work. In exchange, Grandpa Frank agreed not to seek immediate damages for the harassment while the criminal and civil investigations were ongoing. Carl and his crew from Gulf Coast Roofing started work that Wednesday. They finished the job in 2 days, just like he promised. The roof looked perfect, and the total cost was $8,900, which Grandpa's insurance covered in full. But I was not satisfied. Patricia and Gerald were still out there, and even though they were under investigation, they had not faced any real consequences yet. The news cycle had moved on to other stories. The social media outrage had died down, and I knew from experience that rich people with good lawyers often found ways to wriggle out of accountability. I wanted to make sure they paid for what they did. One of the other things I had learned during my research was that Fast Fix Construction had a lot of equipment stored at a warehouse facility on the outskirts of Pensacola. According to the property records, Gerald Hendricks leased the warehouse, but did not own it. and according to several of the complaints I had read, a lot of the equipment Fast Fix used was actually paid for by HOA funds under the guise of community maintenance equipment. In other words, Gerald had bought tools and machinery with homeowner money and was using it for his private business. I called Walter Simmons and asked him about it. "That is a great catch," Walter said. "If we can prove that HOA funds were used to purchase equipment that Gerald then used for his private business, that is textbook embezzlement. But we would need documentation, receipts, board meeting minutes, financial records, and getting that stuff while the investigation is ongoing is tricky. What if the equipment just disappeared?" There was a long pause. "Zach, I cannot advise you to do anything illegal." "I am not talking about doing anything illegal. I am talking about exercising my grandfather's rights as an HOA member to reclaim community property that was misappropriated." That is a very creative interpretation. But technically, if the equipment was purchased with HOA funds, it does belong to the HOA, which means it belongs collectively to all the homeowners. So if a homeowner were to, say, retrieve that equipment and hold it in trust pending the outcome of the investigation, that would not necessarily be theft. That is what I thought. I did not tell Grandpa Frank what I was planning. He had been through enough stress, and I did not want him worrying about me doing something stupid. Instead, I called up an old friend from Birmingham, a guy named Derek Paulson who ran a small construction business. Derek owed me a favor from a few years back when I helped him out of a legal jam. "I need to borrow a piece of heavy equipment," I told Derek, "specifically a backhoe or excavator, and I need it in Pensacola this weekend." "What are you planning, Zach? Nothing illegal, I hope. Can you help me or not?" Derek was quiet for a moment, then he laughed. "Yeah, man. I can get you a backhoe. I've got a little case 580 that would be perfect. I will trailer it down Friday night, but you are buying me a very expensive dinner after this. Deal." Friday evening, Derek rolled into Pensacola with his truck and trailer hauling a compact backhoe. We met at a motel off Interstate 10, and I filled him in on the full story over beers and pizza. "So let me get this straight," Derek said. "You are going to drive a backhoe into this guy's warehouse and take back equipment that technically belongs to the HOA. That is the plan. And you do not think this is going to end with you in jail? I have a lawyer on standby. And besides, I am not stealing anything. I am recovering stolen property." Derek shook his head, grinning. "You are insane. I love it. When do we do this?" "Tomorrow morning, early, before anyone is around." Saturday at 5:30 a.m., Derek and I drove to the warehouse facility where Fast Fix stored their equipment. It was a sketchy industrial area with a bunch of metal buildings and chain-link fences. Gerald's warehouse was toward the back, Unit 17, a big garage door with a regular door next to it. The place had no security cameras that I could see and no security guard. The regular door was locked, but the garage door was not. It rolled up when I pulled on it. Inside was a treasure trove. 2 pickup trucks, a dump trailer, a large generator, several pallets of roofing materials, power tools, ladders, scaffolding, and sitting in the back corner, a small skid steer loader. Derek whistled. "That is a lot of gear." I started taking pictures of everything, making sure to capture serial numbers and identifying marks. Then, I used bolt cutters to open the storage cage where the smaller tools were kept and started loading them into Derek's truck. "Are we really doing this?" Derek asked, but he was already helping me load. "We are really doing this." It took us about an hour to load up everything we could fit in Derek's truck. Then I climbed into the backhoe Derek had brought and fired it up. The engine roared to life, loud enough to wake the dead. "Follow me," I shouted to Derek. I drove the backhoe right into the warehouse, positioned the bucket, and hooked it under the skid steer. The backhoe was not really designed for lifting like that, but I managed to drag the skid steer out of the warehouse and onto Derek's trailer. Just as we were securing the straps, a security patrol car pulled into the lot. My heart jumped into my throat, but I kept working like nothing was wrong. The security guard, a young guy who looked bored, rolled down his window. "What are you doing?" "Repossessing equipment," I said, holding up my phone with the photos I had taken earlier. "This stuff was purchased with funds embezzled from Pine Valley HOA. I am a representative of the Homeowners Association, and I am taking custody of community property." It was complete nonsense, legally speaking, but I said it with enough confidence that the guard hesitated. "You have paperwork?" he asked. "I have documentation of the embezzlement and proof that this equipment was purchased with HOA funds. If you want to call the police, go ahead. I will explain everything to them." The guard looked at me, then at Derek, then at the trailer loaded with equipment. He clearly did not get paid enough to deal with this. "Just finish up and get out of here," he said, and drove off. Derek and I looked at each other and burst out laughing from the sheer adrenaline rush. "We need to move," Derek said. "That guy might actually call the cops." We finished strapping down the skid steer and drove out of the facility. My hands were shaking and my heart was pounding, but we had done it. We drove straight to a storage unit I had rented under Grandpa Frank's name, unloaded everything, and locked it up. Then Derek hitched up his backhoe and prepared to head back to Birmingham. "That was the craziest thing I have ever done," Derek said, shaking his head. "And I once drove a bulldozer through my ex-girlfriend's fence, so that is saying something. Thanks for your help, man. I owe you big time." "Yeah, you do. Stay out of trouble, Zach." After Derek left, I called Walter Simmons and told him what I had done. There was a very long silence on the other end of the line. "Zach, what you just described could be considered theft, burglary, trespassing, and possibly armed robbery, depending on how aggressive the prosecutor wants to be." I did not have a weapon. A backhoe counts as a deadly weapon in Florida if you use it in the commission of a crime. My stomach dropped. Seriously. But, and this is a big but, if we can establish that the equipment was in fact purchased with embezzled HOA funds, and that you were acting in good faith to preserve community assets, we might be able to defend this. Emphasis on might. "Did anyone see you?" A security guard. But I told him I was repossessing HOA property and he let us go. "Okay, that is actually helpful. It shows you were not trying to hide what you were doing. You genuinely believed you had the right to take that equipment. We can work with that. But Zach, do not do anything else. No more vigilante property retrieval. Let the legal system handle it from here." "Fine. But what do we do with all the stuff I took? Keep it secured. Document everything." "I am going to file an emergency motion on Monday to place the equipment under court supervision pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. If a judge agrees, the equipment will be held as evidence and we will be in the clear. If the judge does not agree, you might be facing criminal charges." "Great. So I might go to jail for trying to help my grandfather. Welcome to the American legal system. But honestly, Zach, I think we will be okay. You did not steal this stuff for personal gain. You did it to preserve evidence and protect the interests of the HOA members. That plays well in court." I hung up and sat in my truck for a long time, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. Saturday afternoon, I was back at Grandpa Frank's house when a Pensacola police cruiser pulled into the driveway. My first thought was that Gerald had reported the missing equipment and I was about to be arrested. But the officer who got out was friendly, and he asked to speak to Frank Yates about the HOA matter. "I am Detective Morrison," he said, shaking Grandpa's hand. "I am working with the state attorney's office on the investigation into Patricia and Gerald Hendricks. I understand there was an incident this morning involving the removal of equipment from a warehouse." My throat went dry. "That was me. I can explain." Detective Morrison held up his hand. "I am not here to arrest anyone. I am here because Gerald Hendricks filed a police report claiming his business equipment was stolen. But when we ran the serial numbers on the equipment he listed, several items came back as purchased through Coastal Home Services, which is the management company for Pine Valley, HOA. So either Gerald filed a false police report, or he is admitting that he personally owns equipment that was bought with HOA member dues." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we seize the equipment as evidence in the fraud investigation. Where is it currently located?" I gave him the address of the storage unit. Detective Morrison made some notes and then looked at me seriously. "Between you and me, what you did was reckless and could have gone very badly, but it also cracked this case wide open. We have been trying to prove the connection between the HOA finances and Gerald's business, and you just handed it to us on a silver platter. So thank you, but also do not do it again." "I will not." After Detective Morrison left, Grandpa Frank turned to me with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "Zachary Michael Yates, did you really drive a backhoe into a warehouse and steal construction equipment? I prefer the term tactical asset recovery, but yes." He laughed, a real deep belly laugh that I had not heard from him since before Grandma died. "Your grandmother would have loved this. She always said you had more guts than sense." I learned from the best. The following week moved quickly. Walter Simmons filed his class action lawsuit against the Hendricks and the HOA board. The state attorney's office filed formal criminal charges against Patricia and Gerald for fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. The FBI opened their own investigation into whether the scheme extended beyond Pine Valley to other HOAs in Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. And on Thursday, Patricia and Gerald Hendricks were arrested at their home. The news coverage showed Patricia being led out in handcuffs, her face hidden behind her hair, while Gerald shouted at the officers that this was all a misunderstanding. The local news ran the story with the headline "HOA Horror: Husband and Wife Accused of Defrauding Homeowners Out of Hundreds of Thousands." Jennifer Carmichael interviewed me for a follow-up piece. "How does it feel to see Patricia and Gerald in custody?" she asked. "It feels like justice," I said. "But the real victory is that the Pine Valley homeowners can start rebuilding their community without corruption. My grandfather and his neighbors deserve to feel safe in their homes, not terrorized by the people who are supposed to be looking out for them." The interview aired that night, and I got dozens of messages from people thanking me for standing up to the HOA. Several other people from different communities reached out saying they were dealing with similar situations and asking for advice. I realized this was bigger than just Grandpa Frank and Pine Valley. HOA abuse was rampant across the country, and most people did not have the resources or the knowledge to fight back. They just paid the inflated fees and suffered in silence. 2 weeks later, Walter called with an update on the lawsuit. The Hendricks are going to settle. Their attorney reached out and offered a deal. They will pay full restitution to all the homeowners who were overcharged, plus they will surrender control of Coastal Home Services and Fast Fix Construction. The companies will be dissolved, and the assets will be used to pay back the victims. In exchange, they want the civil suit dropped so they can focus on defending the criminal charges. Is that a good deal? For your grandfather and the other homeowners, yes. They will get their money back, probably within 6 months. For the Hendricks, no. They are still facing serious prison time on the criminal charges. The state attorney is not backing down, especially now that the FBI has linked them to similar schemes in 3 other states. We are talking about federal wire fraud charges with mandatory minimum sentences. Good. They deserve prison. I agree. But Zach, there is one more thing. The Pine Valley HOA is essentially bankrupt. Between the legal fees, the restitution, and the cost of fixing all the problems Patricia created, there is no money left. The homeowners are going to have to vote on whether to dissolve the HOA entirely or rebuild it from scratch with new leadership and new covenants. What does my grandfather want to do? I have not asked him yet. I wanted to talk to you first. I thought about it. Grandpa Frank had lived in Pine Valley for 23 years. It was his home, his community, his connection to the life he had built with Grandma Helen. Dissolving the HOA would mean instability and uncertainty. But rebuilding it meant trusting that the homeowners could create something better than what Patricia had corrupted. Let's rebuild it, I said. But we do it right this time. Transparent finances, elected board members with term limits, open meetings, and no approved contractor lists. Homeowners should have the freedom to choose their own service providers. That is a good vision. I will set up a community meeting and we can propose it to the residents. The community meeting was held on a Tuesday evening in the Pine Valley Clubhouse. Nearly every homeowner in the development showed up. About 150 people crammed into a room designed for 80. Grandpa Frank stood at the front with Walter Simmons and me, and we presented our plan for rebuilding the HOA. There were questions, concerns, and a few angry outbursts from people who thought the HOA should just be dissolved entirely. But eventually, people came around to the idea that a well-run HOA could actually benefit the community, protecting property values and maintaining common areas without the corruption and abuse. We held a vote, and it passed with 78% approval. The new Pine Valley HOA would be governed by an elected 5-person board with staggered 2-year terms. All meetings would be open to homeowners. All financial records would be published quarterly, and there would be no restrictions on contractor choice beyond basic licensing and insurance requirements. Grandpa Frank was elected as the first president of the new board. He tried to decline, saying he was too old, but the community insisted. They trusted him, and they knew he would never take advantage of them the way Patricia had. As for Patricia and Gerald Hendricks, their criminal trial was set for 8 months later. In the meantime, they were both released on bail with electronic monitoring and travel restrictions. Walter told me that the state attorney was confident of getting convictions on multiple felony counts, which would likely result in significant prison sentences for both of them. I had to go back to Birmingham for work, but I drove down to Pensacola every few weeks to check on Grandpa Frank and help him with his HOA duties. He seemed happier than he had been in years, engaged and purposeful, enjoying the responsibility of helping rebuild the community. One Saturday afternoon in late spring, about 4 months after everything started, Grandpa and I were sitting on his porch drinking iced tea when a car pulled up that I did not recognize. A woman got out, mid-40s, professional-looking, carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Yates, Mr. Frank Yates." She called out. "That is me," Grandpa said. "My name is Linda Marshall. I am with the Florida Attorney General's Office, Consumer Protection Division. I wanted to speak with you about your experience with the Pine Valley HOA if you have a few minutes." We invited her up to the porch, and she sat down with a legal pad and pen. "We are investigating whether the Hendricks case represents a larger pattern of HOA fraud in Florida," Linda explained. We have received complaints about 37 different HOAs across the state, all with similar characteristics. Aggressive enforcement, inflated contractor fees, conflicts of interest, and intimidation tactics. We are trying to determine if there are common connections between these HOAs, and if so, whether there is an organized criminal enterprise at work. You think Patricia and Gerald were part of something bigger? I asked. Possibly. We know that Coastal Home Services managed 4 other HOAs in addition to Pine Valley, and we have found evidence of similar schemes at all of them. But we have also found connections to other management companies that might be related. We are still piecing it together. Grandpa told her his story in detail, and Linda took extensive notes. When he finished, she thanked him and handed him her card. If you think of anything else, or if anyone contacts you trying to interfere with your testimony, please call me immediately. The Hendricks have connections, and we need to make sure witnesses are protected. After she left, I looked at Grandpa. Do you feel safe here? I feel fine, Zach. Patricia and Gerald are under house arrest. They cannot hurt me, but their friends might. Then you will drive down here with another backhoe and scare them off, he said with a grin. The trial began in early September. It was held in federal court because the FBI had taken over the case after finding evidence of interstate wire fraud. I took a week off work to attend and support Grandpa Frank, who was one of the key witnesses. The courtroom was packed with Pine Valley residents, reporters, and legal observers. Patricia and Gerald sat at the defense table with their attorneys, both of them looking diminished and tired compared to the powerful, intimidating figures they had been a year earlier. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. They showed how Patricia had used her position on the HOA board to steer all repair and maintenance contracts to Gerald's companies. They showed how Gerald had inflated prices by an average of 140% compared to market rates. They showed how the couple had used HOA funds to purchase equipment and materials that they then used for private jobs, pocketing the profits. They showed how they had intimidated and harassed homeowners who questioned their authority. And they showed how the scheme had extended to 4 other HOAs, generating over $1.2 million in fraudulent profits over 5 years. Grandpa Frank testified on the 3rd day. He was nervous, but once he started talking, his military training kicked in. He spoke clearly and calmly, describing exactly what had happened, how Patricia had pressured him, how the contractor fees were inflated, how he had been threatened with fines and liens. The defense attorneys tried to rattle him on cross-examination, suggesting that he had misunderstood the HOA rules, that he had failed to read the covenants properly, that the fees were justified by market conditions after the hurricane. But Grandpa held firm. I read the covenants. I understood them, and I also understood that I was being cheated. When my grandson investigated, he found proof that Patricia and Gerald were running a scam. That is not a misunderstanding. That is fraud. The defense rested without calling Patricia or Gerald to testify, which the legal experts said was a sign that their case was weak. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, they found Patricia and Gerald Hendricks guilty on all counts: wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, Patricia and Gerald were taken into custody, their bail revoked because of the flight risk posed by the guilty verdicts. I was sitting in the courtroom gallery next to Grandpa Frank when the verdicts were read. I watched Patricia's face crumble, watched her attorneys pat her shoulder in empty consolation, watched the marshals lead her and Gerald out of the courtroom in handcuffs. "It is over," Grandpa said quietly. "It is over," I agreed, but it was not quite over. There was still sentencing. 6 weeks later, we returned to the courthouse. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Deborah Klein, heard statements from several victims before imposing sentence. Robert Torres spoke about the financial strain the fraud had put on his family. Susan Pack spoke about the emotional toll of being harassed and intimidated. Grandpa Frank spoke about the betrayal of trust, about how he had believed the HOA was there to help him, only to discover it was a tool for exploitation. Then Judge Klein addressed Patricia and Gerald directly. "You took advantage of people in their most vulnerable moments," she said. "After a natural disaster, when people were scared and stressed and desperate for help, you saw an opportunity to steal from them. You used your positions of authority to intimidate and coerce. You showed no remorse, no conscience, no humanity. This court will not tolerate such conduct." She sentenced Patricia to 8 years in federal prison. She sentenced Gerald to 10 years because of his leadership role in the scheme and his prior criminal history, which included a conviction for insurance fraud in the 1990s. Both of them would also be required to pay full restitution to all victims, and they would be permanently barred from serving on any HOA board or holding any position of authority in community associations. When the judge finished, Patricia started crying. Gerald stared straight ahead, expressionless. The marshals led them away, and this time, I knew it really was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Jennifer Carmichael was there, along with crews from national news outlets who had picked up the story. "Mr. Yates, how do you feel about the sentences?" Jennifer asked, holding a microphone toward Grandpa Frank. "I feel relieved," he said. "Justice was done. But more importantly, I hope this sends a message to other HOAs and other people in positions of power. You cannot abuse people without consequences. Eventually, someone will stand up to you. What advice would you give to other homeowners dealing with HOA problems?" Grandpa looked at me, and I stepped forward. "Document everything," I said. "Keep records, take pictures, save emails and letters. Do not be afraid to ask questions and challenge decisions that do not make sense. And if necessary, get a lawyer and fight back. Bullies count on people being too tired or too scared to resist. Do not give them that satisfaction." The interview aired that night, and once again, my phone blew up with messages from people across the country sharing their HOA horror stories. I realized that Grandpa Frank and I had stumbled into something much bigger than we had anticipated. We had not just taken down one corrupt HOA. We had sparked a conversation about accountability and transparency in community governance. Over the following months, several states passed new laws regulating HOAs, requiring financial audits, open meetings, and independent oversight. The FBI launched a task force to investigate HOA fraud nationwide, and dozens of homeowners filed lawsuits against their own HOAs, emboldened by the Pine Valley case. As for Grandpa Frank, he served 2 terms as president of the Pine Valley HOA board before retiring. Under his leadership, the community thrived. Property values increased, common areas were well maintained, and most importantly, homeowners felt respected and heard. On a warm Sunday afternoon in November, almost exactly 2 years after Hurricane Melissa, I drove down to Pensacola for a special ceremony. The Pine Valley community was dedicating a new playground and pavilion in the common area, funded by the restitution money from the Hendricks settlement. Grandpa Frank cut the ribbon, surrounded by neighbors and friends. Kids immediately swarmed the playground, their laughter filling the air. People gathered under the pavilion for a potluck lunch, sharing food and stories. I stood back and watched, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what a community was supposed to be. Not a tool for exploitation, not a source of fear and stress, but a place where people looked out for each other and worked together for the common good. Grandpa Frank walked over and put his arm around my shoulders. "Thank you, Zach. I could not have done this without you. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but you were the one who had the courage to fight back when I was ready to give up. You were the one who drove that backhoe into the warehouse," he chuckled. "Still cannot believe you did that." It seemed like a good idea at the time. It was a good idea, a crazy idea, but a good one. We stood there together, watching the community he had helped rebuild, and I felt grateful for everything that had happened. Yes, it had been stressful and frightening and uncertain. But it had also been worth it, because sometimes standing up to bullies requires more than just words and legal filings. Sometimes it requires showing up with a backhoe and taking back what is rightfully yours. And sometimes that is exactly what justice looks like. The sun was setting over Pine Valley, casting long shadows across the playground where children played and families gathered. In that moment, I understood something important. Home was not just a place. It was a feeling of safety, of belonging, of knowing that you were surrounded by people who cared about you and would stand up for you when times got tough. Grandpa Frank had found that home again, and I had played a small part in helping him reclaim it from people who tried to take it away. As we walked back to his house, he told me stories about Grandma Helen, about the dreams they had shared for their retirement in Florida, about the life they had built together in Pine Valley before she passed away. And I realized that by fighting for his home, I had also been fighting for her memory, for the legacy of love and community they had created. That night, after everyone had gone home and the playground sat empty under the stars, I drove back to Birmingham with a full heart and a clear conscience. I had done what needed to be done, and I had no regrets. Patricia and Gerald Hendricks were in federal prison, paying for their crimes. The Pine Valley community was healed and stronger than ever. And Grandpa Frank was happy, surrounded by neighbors who appreciated his leadership and his kindness. Sometimes life gives you clear choices between right and wrong, and sometimes those choices require bold action. I had chosen to act, to fight, to stand up for what was right even when it was risky and uncertain. And in the end, that made all the difference. 3 months after the playground dedication, I got a letter in the mail from Patricia Hendricks. It had been forwarded through her attorney, and I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten, shaky and small on lined notebook paper. In it, Patricia apologized for what she had done. She said prison had given her time to reflect on her choices, to understand the harm she had caused, to recognize that her pursuit of money and power had destroyed her life and hurt countless innocent people. She did not ask for forgiveness. She did not make excuses. She simply said she was sorry, and she hoped that her victims could move forward and rebuild their lives. I read the letter twice, then I filed it away in the folder with all the other documents from the case. I did not know if Patricia's remorse was genuine or if it was just another manipulation. But either way, it did not change anything. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. That was how justice worked. That was how it had to work. I never responded to her letter, and I never heard from her again. Years later, when people asked me about the Pine Valley HOA case, I would tell them the whole story, about Grandpa Frank and the hurricane, about Patricia's scam and the inflated repair estimates, about the investigation and the news coverage and the trial, and about the backhoe, always about the backhoe, because that was the moment when we stopped being victims and became fighters. That was the moment when we took control of the situation and refused to be pushed around anymore. That was the moment when we showed Patricia and Gerald that they had picked the wrong people to mess with. And that was the moment I learned one of the most important lessons of my life. Sometimes you have to take bold, unconventional action to make things right. Sometimes following the rules is not enough. Sometimes you have to drive a backhoe into a warehouse and take back what belongs to you, not because it is easy, not because it is safe, but because it is right. And in the end, doing what is right is the only thing that matters.